Morning everyone, and welcome to the launch of the 2020 Forecourt report and of course the Forecourt study tour. You'll be pleased to know that given the weather this week, we are doing this from indoors, so there's no need for ACS branded umbrellas this year, but we've got a packed agenda for you in the next hour and a half, which I'm really pleased to be kicking off for you. So I'm going to take you through the main Forecourt report itself, which we're very pleased to share with you. And then I'll be joined on a panel by Dave Ablett from MFG, Nadine Stacey from Applegreen, and James Spencer from Portland Fuel. So really interested to get their insights and their thoughts on the report and the future of the sector itself. We're then going to have a quick coffee break or tea break or whatever your drink of choice is this time in the morning. And then we're going to come back and Paul Chamberlain is going to take us through a virtual bus tour, virtual this time, so no dodgy parking, a virtual bus tour of Nadine's store and Dave's store, two fantastic sites, and we're going to walk you through those and see what's going on in there. So without further ado then, let's get into the report itself. And this is the 6th edition of the Forecourt report, and the reason we put this together is we think that forecourts have their own place in the market that is extremely important, and there are enough differences beyond just the pumps outside between forecourts and the rest of the convenience sector that we think it's worth getting into what those differences are, what those similarities are, and where everyone can learn from each other. Of course, this report would not be without the help of external data providers. Of course, we do our own large-scale surveys, which build up a lot of the information in the report. But we also need help from others to provide different data. So we are extremely grateful to Experian, to Lumina Intelligence, to Nielsen, Portland Fuel, William Reed and ZapMap for providing some of the data that goes into this report. And as I was here a couple of months ago at Summit talking about the main local shop report, I think it's fantastic that we are able to bring you a full report with all the data that we need, despite everything that's been going on over the last 6 months. Let's get into it then. And overall, I think there are no big surprises in terms of the number of sites in the UK. It's always been around about 8 to 8,500 since I've been doing the report, which is of the last 6 years or so. And about 7,500, was just under 7,500 of those sites have shops. So those are the ones we typically focus on because the others are, I guess, to an extent unmanned. And it's broadly still I say independent, but obviously with Forecourt's slightly different way of defining it, but sort of dealer-owned, 2/3 of those, and then sort of oil companies and high market supermarkets and the multiples, taking up the other third there. I think it will be really interesting to see over the next few years as we go through with lots of changes in the sector as to whether that difference shrinks, because those 1,000-odd sites that are without a shop, I think it's really interesting to see if they double down on that and just say that is our point of difference. That is the model that we run. It's just about fuel. It's just about petrol, diesel, or if they decide to change and to move more into having a full shop offering. And of course, there's lots of context around this, around the government looking to move everyone across to more sustainable fuels and move away from fossil fuels. And I'm sure that's something that James Spencer in our panel later will have something to say about. In terms of the types of stores, I've talked about the importance of convenience, and there's a bit of a change this year. So about sort of 80-odd stores have moved from that standard type of store, so sort of typically around sort of 1,000 square feet, a limited convenience offering, but mainly selling sort of crisp snacks, drinks, soft drinks, that kind of thing, rather than a full convenience store. So there's been a switch across about 80 stores from that standard model into a fuller convenience store. And some of the stats that I'll come to a little bit later on will will give a bit more of an indication of why that is. And I think, to be honest with you, that's probably going to be a longer term trend. I would expect more and more stores where they have the space available to move from that standard format, that sort of limited convenience format, across to a fuller convenience store, for all sorts of reasons, which we will get into. When I was here 6 weeks or so ago talking about the main local shop report, I said that convenience stores operate everywhere. It is no different for forecourts. Forecourts are everywhere. And this these definitions are, I wouldn't get too hung up on them. The main thing is that you're never too far away from a forecourt, thankfully. Even though, if you go back sort of 20 odd years, there are quite a few less than there were then, but it certainly has stabilised in the last decade at least. And I think we've got to a point where those sites are very much sustainable and very much sort of working for the needs of those customers. And this is something that's even more prevalent with forecourts than it is with the rest of the sector. And so more than 4 out of 10 stores have no other business nearby. And it's these stores that I would expect to have a fuller convenience offerings, very little competition nearby. They've probably got a catchment of customers that is probably quite a bit bigger than your average convenience store catchment, because some people will be driving out to the forecourt. But those stores are absolutely essential. Those ones in isolated areas, those ones in rural areas, absolutely essential to providing those services to customers. And those are the ones that I would expect to have a fuller convenience store offering. Of course, there are 1 in 8, 16%, 1 in 7, something like that, that are in city centres. And as we talked about in our COVID report, our COVID impact report, it's probably those stores that I would expect there to be I guess the biggest negative impact, and that's because sort of the transient trade that they get, the office workers, the people just coming in and out of work and those kind of things, they, I would imagine, would struggle more, just because they have, they'll be in a town centre, there'll be fewer people around, fewer people living in that area. And that's where we see a potential downturn over the last 6 months. And that tallies really with what we've seen. So the total value of sales of the forecourt sector is still phenomenal. We talk to government about big numbers all the time. This is one of those big numbers, almost £5 billion in sales for the forecourt sector. And that is, of course, that is excluding fuel. So with fuel on, that's another whole chunk of revenue for the government in terms of tax. But when you look at the sales, it is as you expect. It hasn't changed that much over the year. But the one thing that I think has had a bit of a dip is convenience and deli, which was a bit higher up last year. So according to the figures that Nielsen have kindly provided us this year, the convenience deli has dipped a bit. And I think that makes sense, because that's people that aren't picking up sandwiches, breakfast, whatever it might be, on their way to work, because they're not going to work, they're not going out, and they're, more people work from home, more people isolating. And as we move into a second wave of restrictions and tiers and all that kind of thing, which is absolutely live now, it'll be interesting to see if that continues, or if people are more comfortable with going out to retailers and picking up bits and pieces rather than doing that bigger shop. One thing that always impresses me, I talked about big numbers just a minute ago about sales, the number of forecourts that are investing and the amount that they're investing is always incredibly impressive to me. Forecourts invest significantly more than the rest of the convenience sector per store. And one thing that I think really illustrates that is when you look at full store refits. So 11% of forecourts are in the process of, or have recently carried out a full store refit, which in some cases is a full knockdown rebuild, or it could be a full gutting of the site. And when you compare that to the rest of the convenience sector, I think it's 5% in the rest of the convenience sector in the local shop report. So this shows that there is still a huge growth opportunity for forecourts that are perhaps realising that they want to move from that that kiosk, that standard store, into a fuller convenience offer with more services, with more grocery. And that's certainly reflected in what's being invested in here. Of course, we can't talk about investment without talking about electric vehicles and electric charging points and alternative power. There's been a massive increase in the number of fully electric vehicles and PHEVs, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, registered. And I'll get to some of the sales of different types of vehicles in a moment. But that kind of model has really held up over the last year compared to others which haven't. And there's been a big jump. There's been an extra 3,000 charging points overall, an extra 3,000 locations offering charging points overall in the UK. And that hasn't necessarily been reflected in the number of forecourt sites. So one thing I would implore is not necessarily compare this directly with last year, because the stats are, the way they're put together is slightly different. And this year we don't include service stations, so we don't include those. If you go to services on the M1, you get the sort of bank of Tesla charging points. Those sort of things aren't included. These are about sort of forecourt sites. And so at least 160 odd sites offering electric charging. And I know for a fact that lots of new sites have earmarked electric charging for their premises, for their parking spaces, but not necessarily have them installed yet. And it's interesting to look at the forecourt sector's role in electric charging, and whether forecourts are going to be expected to take a lot of the brunt of this, because of course it is a significant investment to put one of these charging points in, and the rate of technological change is extremely fast. So I think there are a lot of forecourts out there that are perhaps a little bit nervous about investing specifically in electric charging as the technology stands now, because the tech might change in the next 2-3 years, or there might be restrictions on what the grid can provide. And I think that's another big thing I want to talk to our panelists about, and it's certainly something that we've been talking about a lot internally and in our public affairs work. And the team have written a letter actually to the Transport Secretary this week, and just calling for a bit more support for forecourts and helping them to invest in this infrastructure that the government is so very clearly focused on. And I thought it would be good to just dive into some of the differences here. So this is from the ZAP map live map of where the charging points are. You can look this up online. You can see it as it happens. It's especially useful if you've got an electric car yourself and you're looking for a place to charge it. I would say that wherever you go on this, if you're planning a trip to Snowdonia and you've got an electric car that doesn't have the best range, then there's going to be a bit of a nervous trip across Wales there. But nonetheless, if you look at service stations and forecourts on the left there, they pretty well tally with all the sort of major trunk roads, major motorways. And then, of course, a decent cluster in London and the bigger cities. When you then look at retail car parks as a potential alternative for people charging their vehicles, there's a bit more of a spread. There's certainly a bit more of a spread in the south and the southeast, and then more of a concentration when you get sort of into the Midlands, up into the sort of north of England there. I should say as well, I haven't deliberately left off the very north of England and Scotland. I do care about those areas. I'm not like the government, but just for the sake of this illustration, if I pull back anymore, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see the pin. So we are where we are with this. But one thing that really struck me, and one thing that I thought was really interesting, was that lots of those dots for forecourts and service stations are purple. And those are the rapid charging points. Those are sort of some of the best ones you can get out there. People will be charged up within 45 minutes, an hour. Whereas if you look at car parks, retail car parks, or your supermarket car parks, whatever, there's a much bigger discrepancy. So lots of that blue, which is the fast charging as opposed to the rapid charging, so not quite as powerful. And then you see a lot more of a sort of smattering of yellow, which are the older sort of legacy, slower ones. And we look at a couple of other different areas. So workplace car parks is another one where you'd expect quite a big split between sort of geographical areas. It doesn't necessarily quite as much. Again, mostly blue there, mostly that sort of middle level of charging point as opposed to the faster ones. And then when you look at on-street charging, and on-street charging is one of those things that the government talks about, and having a charging point coming out of lampposts and all that kind of thing. Well, essentially, on-street charging is a London thing right now, and it's pretty diverse in terms of what you're going to get when you get on-street charging. But at the same time, if people are charging overnight, then that's not necessarily a problem. If it takes 5-6 hours, but you're doing it overnight, that's not an issue. But I thought it was interesting and you can look at these maps online now. I thought it was interesting just to bring that out, because we always talk about the role of forecourts in the electric charging future, and I think we are doing extremely well at providing the better technology, the faster technology. But that's not to say that we should be solely relied upon to provide this service in the future. And it's still, I think, quite a way off for the government finding the right balance, and of course the grid finding the right balance of what power they can provide to make this sustainable and to make electric cars, workable for everyone making all sorts of journeys. This is the overall split of how the chargers work. So, just over 1 in 5 chargers are that rapid chargers. Some of the ultra rapid ones, sort of typically the Tesla banks. So we're doing pretty well as a sector. If most of our charging points are rapid, then we are on the higher end of the technology as it is right now. But again, that will have come at a significant investment, will come at a significant cost. And if the tech changes again, I think there's it's a lot easier for stores to sort of stick with what they've got rather than look for incremental gains year over year. Whereas if you've got a slow point that's been in for 10 years, and then you can, I guess, jump to an ultra rapid, it might be a bit easier. Looking at fuel sales then, I mentioned that James is going to join us on the panel, obviously an expert in fuel. There's been a bit of a levelling off this year in terms of diesel sales, which you'd expect because of the sort of less activity going on. And it'll be interesting to see if that sort of 2017, 2018 figure, if that was the peak. Because of course the government targets to get to no more new petrol and diesel vehicles sold by 2035. That'll be really interesting to see if that's starting to reflect in people's choices. Of course, fuel pricing looked pretty steady up until about March, and then it didn't, just like the rest of the world didn't. And I think there's a bit of a recovery now, but it'll be interesting to see from our panelists later about how the changes in price over the last 6 months have impacted those businesses, because usually you've got lower fuel prices, that drives a lot more people in and a lot more competition, but we are of course in uncharted territory over this year. And I mentioned that hybrid and electric vehicles were the ones that had held on. I mean, that is absolutely the case so far this year. So this data shows huge drop off in diesel cars being registered this year, huge drop off in petrol cars. And yes, a slight reduction in the number of hybrid and electric vehicles, but only a slight reduction. I mean, the fact that we've gone in 1 year from diesels being 4 times as likely to be registered as a hybrid electric car to then almost outselling them, I think is extremely impressive. And perhaps that says a bit more about the trends that we're seeing. Otherwise, perhaps it's just an acceleration of the existing trends, but that's certainly one to look out for, especially when we get into a bit more normality and a bit more of people going out a bit more. This again, just a breakdown of the different types of hybrid electric sales. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Diesel hybrids being a sort of growth area in the last couple of years, but I think more than anything else, the diesel hybrid, the petrol hybrid market, I think their days are probably numbered, I would suspect, and you can see that from 2018 that segment of the market is dipping a bit more, and I think that share will be taken up by plug-in hybrids and of course fully electric vehicles as well. So let's get into a bit more about what the stores are doing themselves. So much like with the main local shop report, much like the rest of the sector, if you're an independent owner, you're most likely you are focused on one store. You've got one business that you're dealing with. And you don't need me to tell you that forecourt operators work extremely hard. It's long hours, it's hard work, but of course extremely rewarding as well. And thankfully, it's not putting that many people off because 1 in 4 have been in the business for more than 25 years. So I've seen a huge amount of change through 4-star and unleaded and hydrogen and all sorts. So, I think for the guys that have been doing it for this long, I would suspect nothing really phases them. And when you look at where owners are coming from, I mean, there's still a segment that are inheriting the business, but it is really a great place for entrepreneurs to start a business as well. And of course, forecourts have been in the headlines a lot, especially recently. And it's not just entrepreneurs, but the people that are running stores. It's a good place to keep costs down as well, in terms of retailers employing family members and having family businesses. Very much reflective of the rest of the convenience sector, but quite a small segment of forecourts are employing family only, and I think that's probably because it's longer hours. They typically open a bit longer. It's a bit more difficult to live above a forecourt than it is for that sort of convenience store model of sort of living above, owning the business, that kind of thing. So there's a sort of slight difference from the rest of the sector. There has been a bit of a change in terms of the space as reported by our sample this year. And I think this is really interesting. So this tallies with what we said earlier about the sort of shift across from stores being a sort of standard store with a limited offering to being a full convenience store, and it also tallies with what we're saying about full store refits. So there are more stores now in that middle segment, in that 1,000 to 2,000 square foot segment, than there were last year, and I think that's indicative of those businesses, as I say, looking to have a wider offer for customers. And as I said a moment ago, compared to the rest of the convenience sector, where less than 5% are open 24 hours, there are a significant proportion of forecourt stores, as you might expect, that are open 24 hours, which brings its own challenges. I mean, especially over the last 6 months, everything that's happened with COVID and making stores secure and giving staff enough time to sort of have breaks and to replenish. I mean, replenishment is a massive thing. If you're open 24 hours, to be able to do that safely. So real challenges for forecourts compared to a lot of the rest of the convenience sector. And I wouldn't be surprised to see that when we do this next year, that perhaps some stores will be looking at limiting their opening hours a little bit more, especially if we see prolonged further restrictions over the next 6 to 12 months as well. Another big number here, and this is one that is always really impressive to me: 91,000 jobs in the forecourt sector. That, again, when we're banging down the door to government, that is extremely important. We talk about the job creators in the UK, and to create nearly 100,000 jobs just in forecourts, extremely important. I'm not going to go into the detail of particularly. As you might expect, mostly people in that sort of 25 to 60 segment. But I think the last 6 months especially has been very competitive in terms of the job market. And I think that in itself is an opportunity to upskill the people that are working in the sector. And with the growth of services, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the potential diversity of things that forecourts offer, that's a real opportunity. And when you look at the hours worked in the convenience sector, it tallies pretty much with forecourts. So lots of local, flexible, secure jobs working different hours, and typically not a high amount of turnover. So most people there working 1 to 5 years in the business, not working less than 1 year for the most part. Now, this is something that I find really interesting. And so when we talk about community activity, convenience stores, of course, do extremely well, always do well, really, each year. But petrol stations sort of lag behind a little bit, and the sort of perception of petrol stations is really interesting. And I'm not sure why that is, because when you look at community activity, forecourts are doing just as much as the rest of the convenience sector. They are just as engaged. And when we go to the panel, it'll be interesting to see what they see community activity as, what they see a community to be, because I think this is something that forecourts can really shout about, can really do, can really just amplify what they're already doing. And I would hope that perception of petrol stations as community retailers improves, because there's no reason why it shouldn't. One of the things that influences that perception is obviously a range of services available. Forecourts are doing a fantastic job here. Some of the things I would just pick out here, so growth, slow growth, but certainly growth in post office as an important service being provided there. And then the two things that I would just really pick out are, so local grocery delivery from forecourts being a thing is fantastic to see, and a real growth area for this year especially. And then the click and collect service. So click and collect for both groceries and for parcels, I think is another potential growth area. Of course, if the stores have the space to do it. And of course, if people are going out and about more, because I think click and collect is less necessary, especially for parcels if people are at home all the time. But that's another area to keep an eye on. In terms of technology, forecourts are typically ahead of the rest of the convenience sector. Obviously, more stores using things like EPOS, digital advertising screens, loyalty platforms, that kind of thing. In-store Wi-Fi is still pretty low, but I would expect that to be perhaps a little bit higher in the coming years as stores are looking to keep people in for a bit longer, especially if they're charging their vehicles. So that's something to keep hold of as well. And then a bit about customers. So as you might expect, people are coming from further away if they're going to a forecourt rather than a convenience store, because they're typically driving rather than walking. And the average basket size and average spend is a little bit lower than it is in the rest of the convenience sector, again, because of that transient nature of forecourt stores. But I should say as well that, especially, I go back over the last 6 months quite a lot, but we've heard forecourt sites saying, people are coming in spending £100, £150 on a full week's shop, and the fact that the store is able to facilitate that is phenomenal. And I just want to finish on this. So these last two slides I think are really interesting. So when you look at the whole of the convenience sector, the start of COVID, the start of lockdown was by far the most searched for when you look at local shops. That doesn't tally with petrol stations. So in previous years, the whole sector, people were looking for local shops, for petrol stations, for convenience stores, whatever it might be, during Christmas, which you might expect. People are, A, they're making long journeys during Christmas, B, they're having to get emergency batteries and stuffing and anything else they might have stuck in the oven for too long during the week of Christmas. And that's where convenience stores have sort of come to their rescue. That's held on for petrol stations last year. But when you look at local shops, it was very, very different. And there wasn't that peak at the start of COVID for people looking for petrol stations. And I think that's really interesting, because all through this presentation, I've said that there are lots of forecourt stores offering a huge amount of products and services. And I would expect that petrol stations and local shops to have a similar level of peak. And maybe it's the case that people think more that their petrol station is their local shop, which is great. But that's certainly one to keep an eye on, especially for the future, as we see forecourts being not just forecourts that also have a convenience store offer, but local shops in their own right. That's everything from me for the report itself. You can download a report right now at acs.org.uk, of course. And if you want print copies, we can sort that out for you as well. Just email Phoebe. Email address is on the screen there, and we will get one out to you. Right then, and now on to the panel. You might have noticed I've magically put some glasses on. I did that very quickly, don't worry about that. I'm joined now by Nadine Stacey from Apple Green, Dave Ablett from Motor Fuel Group, and James Spencer from Portland Fuel. Hello everyone, thanks for joining me on the panel. I guess the first thing to say is, how have the last 6-7 months been for the business, both in terms of the store and sort of, I assume, increase in sales over the last 6 months, and then fuel and the challenges with that. Nadine, I'll come to you first.
Morning, Chris. Thanks for inviting me. So the last 6 months for us we've obviously seen an increase in shop sales, very much in line with the rest of the convenience sector. And with regards to fuel dropped off initially, again, in line with the majority of the other fuel providers of around about 70%. And we got back up to 80%, 85%. And then due to the current restrictions in different tiers in various parts of the country, We're seeing a drop off in fuel in various areas, and some sticking at the kind of 80–85%. As far as stores concerned, we've had a fantastic 6 months, and this started to tear off a little bit, but now again in line with the tiers, and depending whether our sites are in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, we're seeing various increases in sales or sales sticking. So there's a lot of analysis going on at the moment for us to keep an eye on that, Chris.
Sure. And Dave, does that tally with what you've seen certainly in the business over the last few months?
Yeah, it certainly is. Morning, Chris. Very similar to Nadine. It was when the initial lockdown kicked in, fuel dropped away, and the store sales went through the roof. Depending on the size of the proposition of each store as well. Our larger format stores that are full convenience stores certainly saw the increases much more quickly than the sort of smaller sort of 1,200–1,500 square foot boxes we have across the network. So the last sort of 6 to 8 weeks has stabilised, but then likewise as lockdowns kicked in, Wales being a great example right now where fuel has started to fall away a little bit again. The 10 o'clock curfew on alcohol sales there initially has not seen an increase, but as it goes into full lockdown this Friday, we're expecting that sort of side of the purchases that the customers are making is going to pick up again, because they have no other option in terms of spending their weekends should they want to.
Yeah, and James, obviously being an expert on the fuel sector, how bad did it get over the last 6 months in terms of fuel dropping off? Was it just obviously consumers not buying as much fuel, but also in the sort of commercial and freight sector as well? Was that a big drop off?
Nothing too different to what Dave and Nadine has said. March, April, May were massively difficult months in terms of planning of fuel supply. So it's very, very lumpy. So depending on which kind of sector you were looking at. So obviously food supply was kind of almost turbocharged in terms of continuing to get food to shops. Home deliveries kind of went through the roof. And obviously a lot of construction work with some of these Nightingale hospitals, but it was all very, very difficult to plan. So it was diesel was kind of shifting around the UK, and huge demand in the northwest, and then suddenly in the southeast, etc. I think petrol was just a straightforward, came off a cliff for 2 or 3 months. That's obviously reflecting the retail side. And I would say, I don't know about a V-shaped recovery, that's what economists like to talk about, but I would say it's been quite a strong recovery. Maybe just heading into the unknown now with, further tier 2, tier 3 lockdowns. But I would say the base is relatively healthy. Certainly, Forecourt volumes seem to be fairly steady, let's say, and certainly commercial diesel is also, the baseline is pretty sound. Sure.
I just want to touch on, and we could do a whole panel on this, but I'll just touch on it briefly. With all the regulations and restrictions in stores, I'll start with you, Dave, especially things like face coverings, probably given a lot more of the attention in the media. What's compliance been like? Has it been okay? Sort of in the wider convenience sector, you probably see 8 or 9 out of 10 people wearing a face covering. But does that tally with what you're seeing?
Yeah, it certainly does. I think when the law changed initially that everybody needs to be wearing a mask to go into store, it certainly took some time for people to do that, and it can almost be split by sort of times of day in some ways. The very early morning trade, for whatever reason, people tend to be less compliant with wearing a mask, where later on through the day then people are absolutely doing that. In terms of our staff, again, when that law change happened, we immediately went to everybody wearing a mask, just to take away that sort of conflict situation that could occur between a customer as to why have I got to wear a mask and you haven't. But it also protects our people at the same time, which is why we did that as just an extra layer. But people have improved over time, but I think it's worth remembering at the end of the day, we're not the police. We're not there to enforce people to wear it. Yes, we politely remind the customer that they should be wearing one, but we don't want to be putting our people into a conflict situation again, for people choosing for whatever reason not to wear one. And naturally, you do then get some, those customers that for medical reasons can't wear one. But again, you can create a situation if you're not handling that situation carefully. So it's a little bit of a tightrope at times, but majority of people now absolutely are wearing masks. And I think actually probably the peer pressure from other customers now is greater than anything else.
Yeah, and Nadine, Dave mentioned it's like a walking a tightrope a bit of sort of keeping the balance between compliance and keeping people happy in store. Have there been many issues in the stores, or are people sort of generally getting on with it?
I fully support absolutely everything that Dave's just said. So initially, when the communication came out about having to wear masks in sites and in retail environments, they basically stated that if there was a screen, that the site teams didn't necessarily need to wear these masks. However, the same with Dave, I went out with the communication that to stop that confrontation element with the customers coming onto site, it was best to wear them if they could. And if any of our staff couldn't wear the masks, then we had pins to say that they were allowed to not wear the masks for whatever reason. And again, it was just down to that confrontation. We see a lot of customer complaints come our way because customers don't have or are coming into our sites without wearing masks. But like Dave said, we're not the police, we're not there to police it. And we've got signage to say so, stating that, please be kind to the teams, because, during this current situation, they're going to work every morning, keeping our sites trading. And that's just the only way that we could protect them, by asking them to comply with it and wear a mask if they could.
Yeah. No, I think that tallies again with what we're hearing from members. So hopefully it's starting to calm down a little bit now. I just want to pivot across to something I talked about quite a bit in the presentation, which was about electric charging and alternative power options. James, and we've had a question about this from the studio audience as well, about investment in electric charging. What are the barriers to that? What are the problems that fuel retailers are facing when it comes to putting electric charging in? What are the sort of things that they've got to consider?
Well, I guess number one, there's a number of different manufacturers of chargers, so that's a decision choice. There's obviously different cars also require different types of chargers, so unfortunately it doesn't seem to be a one size fits all, which is tricky, because that ties into the third factor, which is lack of space. Obviously, if you have a large site and sufficient parking, and all of that parking is not being used, then putting in chargers may be something that you can do. Obviously, if you've got a busy car park or limited space, then anything you do in terms of putting in a charger takes away an opportunity profit for someone parking their car to go and shop in your site or do anything else. So I think there's clearly an issue there. There's also an issue at do you take away pumping capacity of your existing normal fuels to put in electric chargers? Any electrical work is going to require what you would call hot work in terms of site work and cutting concrete, implementing things. That almost certainly requires some kind of partial shutting of the site. So that's just to get the chargers in. It's making me sound like very anti-electric chargers. I would say I'm not. I think, unfortunately, they are inevitable. I think the car pool is going electric relatively rapidly, I would think. So I think they are a reality. I think once you have the chargers in, you have all kinds of things with tariffs and getting the electricity charges at different times of the day. You pay a lot more for electricity in peak times than you do in quiet times. So if all of your customers are your 24-hour site and they want to come and charge at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's an incredibly cheap tariff. If they want to come at 5 in the evening when everybody's getting back from work, whatever work is now, when we're all working from home, but that conventional peak electricity period, the tariffs are much higher. And, so what's interesting, again, I know a bit more about the commercial side than Forecourts, but what a number of bus depots are now doing is buying these kind of giant battery packs, whereby they take the charge in the night, where it's cheapest, they charge up the battery packs, and then they're able to charge their buses throughout the day at whatever times they choose without having to rely on the expensive tariffs at peak time. Again, problem for a lot of forecourts, these big battery packs, it's not just a big battery pack, you can't see my hands, really it's a very big battery pack, and it requires a lot of space.
Sure. Dave, when we're looking at electric charging and putting points in, we're going to go to your site a little bit later with Paul, and you've got some charging points that are on their way in. How much is that a balance between getting shop customers into park and, you know, making sure that you've got enough space for all these alternative fuels as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's a consideration, obviously, from starting the design build, and in the video that we'll see a little bit later on is a new to industry store that we opened in June this year. So being able to accommodate EV from the outset was a consideration, and knowing that is a market that's going to grow in the future. I think part of it as well is that the charges that we put in will be an expandable concept. So we'll start off with as is in this particular store, we have 4 dedicated parking spaces, but as the market changes over the years, we may need 8, we may need 10. And I think none of us probably actually have the answer as to how big that's going to be and how quickly it's going to be over what time period at the moment. But decision for the choice for us was to make sure that we had something that we could grow without then having to put a secondary installation of additional power in from the grid.
Yeah.
Our sort of big expansion is 2021. And it is the grid that's holding us back at the moment. Again, this particular store we actually opened on a generator, so we didn't even have the chance of going EV when we started. And then there's obviously different choices, as James just said, in terms of the speed of a charging unit. If anybody goes to an IKEA or a Sainsbury's and there's a charging point, it's always going to be a slow charger, because those retailers want to keep the customer inside the store as long as possible. If somebody coming to a forecourt, they don't want to be sat there for an hour whilst the car trickle charges and charges up. They want a fast charger. They're going to be wanting in and out 15-20 minutes. So that's something to consider as well as we move forward, and of course the technology advances with these units. Yeah,
we're getting lots of questions in from everyone watching, so I wanted to try and get to as many of these as possible. Nadine, when you mentioned shop sales going up, can you give any more detail on what were the big winners and losers in terms of categories, and how things like confectionery, food to go have done? Typically, quite strong categories in Forecourt.
Yeah, I mean, so if we look at when this first kind of kicked off, April, May, June time. So with the majority of our food offers being closed, we saw an increase in our food to go, our hot food. So the increase there was good to see, specifically around the A1 sites, because we're there to kind of provide that element to the HGV drivers and the public that are still out there on the roads. As far as categories concerned and store sales, we saw confectionery drop off. And we saw minerals drop off, but that was kind of in line with fuel sales, because there would be the pickup line to go with fuel sales. With confectionery, we saw an increase in take home.
Right.
We concentrated on the take home category in confectionery, and we've also concentrated on take home category on minerals. So we've kind of set the reset button, and then again we've seen minerals go up as we saw more traffic hit the road. Obviously ambient was a huge one for us, where we saw a big increase. The big winners for us would have been tobacco and alcohol. So tobacco just went through the roof, and so did alcohol. And I think that was more a case of people could just call onto our sites, park up, nip in, get their cigarettes, pick up their alcohol, they weren't queuing outside, etc. It was very convenient for them, so that's where we saw the big increases. And then the other one would be domestic fuel. So it seemed that the whole of the UK were out barbecuing, and it didn't matter what the weather was doing.
Yeah.
In line with that, we were putting barbecue packs, sausages and chicken into sites that we never dreamed we'd ever put sausages and chicken into. So they're all the kind of elements and the big wins for us. And then coming out of it, and what we've seen in the last few weeks, is those tier 3 areas. And as Dave said earlier on about the Wales area, initially we had the 10 p.m. curfew to deal with, and then as of Friday, they're back into lockdown. So we're imagining we'll see sales increase again in those kind of categories, but probably not to the level of where we were earlier on this year. I wouldn't say that we're going to see that. And then we've just got to monitor it as it goes on, and it's ever changing, and see which of our locations are in what tiers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. James, I'll come back to you just briefly to talk about the sort of the peak that we saw in the report this year on diesel, and that's sort of looking like it's starting to tail off, and a sort of gradual decline in petrol sales. Is this just an acceleration of what it was going to happen anyway? Is this out of character for the market? And should we expect that decline, if it is a decline now, to go all the way down to zero in the next sort of 10, 15 years when the government looks to get to sort of no new petrol and diesel cars by I think 2035?
Okay, so great question, and I suppose the diplomatic answer would always be, well, possibly not. But the true answer is, I think probably it is the start of a permanent decline in petrol and diesel consumption. One of the things I've found remarkable, if you'd asked me in March whether the green agenda would survive this pandemic or whether it would be significantly put back because obviously other priorities, economic priorities, employment, etc., I would have said this is going to be a big blow to the green agenda. It's going to slow up development. What's been remarkable is the resilience of the green agenda and the fact that all governments, to be fair, even the US, although the president is less of a green advocate, the states, as in the independent states themselves, particularly led by California and some of the Atlantic seaboard states, the EU, the UK itself, now that we're leaving the EU, they're all pushing ahead with their green agenda. And the reality is, whilst cleaner fuels are something that the oil industry can push, the reality is that fossil fuels are not part of that agenda going forward. It doesn't mean it goes overnight. We all know the realism of, how you make a transition, how you decarbonize, and certainly oil as a commodity is used in so many things beyond transport that oil itself will continue. But yeah, I see the carpool transitioning to electric. I almost would say that decision has already been made by the consumer, that as soon as prices come into parity, people will start buying electric cars. And I think I made a presentation to you guys a year ago, possibly 2 years ago. The reason for that is that electric cars are seen as cool, and the next generation of people want to have electric cars. So I think a slow and steady decline is probably on the cards for petrol and diesel for the next 10 years, but slow and steady rather than anything particularly dramatic.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, I think that's going to lead to some potentially interesting decisions that new sites are going to have to make about how much they bank on, like you said, on pumps versus sort of alternative power, and then just parking and all that kind of thing. I just want to come back to Dave quickly and just talk about, I guess, what we've learned in this last 7 months and whether that's going to affect anything you do in terms of strategy for next year and planning ahead. Nadine mentioned take-home confectionery is one thing that is a huge growth area. Is there anything you're looking at when you're planning for next year in terms of more permanent strategy that has been influenced by the last 6-7 months?
I think, again, yes, absolutely is the easy answer to that question. But again, it relates, it's not quite as a straightforward answer. I think it depends on the location of the store. Are we looking at a more of a neighborhood kind of consumer that's coming in all the time, where they're using us as their local convenience store rather than just a distressed purchase as a normal transient site would be. And we certainly saw that sort of sales differential as we've gone through the last 6-7 months. In terms of the convenience stores certainly lifted their sales very quickly at the beginning. The more transient stores sort of followed in suit. All of them saw an increase, but it very much varied as to where that consumer base was from. Like Nadine said earlier, the categories that we saw big increases in were exactly those same categories. I think it was a national trend, wasn't it, for sure? But it's the customer is certainly looking, as it is now. Food to go is a huge growth area for us. And we're putting that into stores this year and into next year as well, and looking for development into that particular area. Is that food for now, fresh food for later, where people are looking for. Again, alcohol absolutely has been tremendous for us, and in certain locations now we are increasing that space because that's what the customer wants. So it really is balancing, but I don't think as retail always is, we can't just sit and decide that our future for next year is what it is today. We need to continually adapt and continually change the space that we're providing for our customers, because they're changing all the time as well.
Yeah. And Nadine, you're in a slightly unique position here, because not only do you have the experience of the last 6 months and the pandemic and everything that happened there, but you've also just completed our executive education course with Surrey. So is there anything that you're putting into the business over the next year or 3 years, whatever the planning is, that you sort of learn from the rest of the sector maybe, or also just from the pandemic as well, and sort of tallying what Dave said?
Yeah. Obviously, it was great to be on that course, because there was suppliers on the course, and there was also other retailers. So I think we all benefited from being in that group throughout the whole COVID experience and what we've seen so far. And there was an element of support from obviously the ACS and from that group, which was great. And it was great to see a lot of the guys were from the co-op estate. It was nice to see that kind of we were in line and sharing ideas. And it's like Dave said, we can't rest on our laurels. The end of the day is the customer will tell us what we're going to be doing in our stores for the future, because it's them that we need to listen to, specifically in our community stores. Our community stores have changed so much throughout this year with regards to planning and what we see for the future. So it's great. It's opened our eyes. We've pressed the reset button, and it's and we're kind of starting again, looking at those businesses and our regional managers and operational managers physically looking at the demographics, the customer, and where that site is situated. So that's one good thing that has come out of this whole situation.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned community stores. We were talking throughout the report about how forecourts don't necessarily shout enough about their community credentials. Dave, how do you reach local communities through the business? Is it social media? Is it in store? How do you sort of make the most of that community feel within the business?
Yeah, I mean, for the stores that that are in those sort of local areas, I think probably the big development certainly for us this year has been social media. And the impact that that's actually had. Certainly all of the direct managed stores within the network now all have their own Facebook pages, Instagram pages, and that's how they're reaching out to their local communities. Particularly at the beginning of the pandemic, where obviously there were shortages on paper products and pasta and rice and all those kind of things. Hand sanitizer right back in the really early days. Putting a Facebook post out to say, hey, we've got some in. Just brought foot traffic through your front door. And that's continued through this year. I guess probably one particular example, we did a refit in a store, reopened it, should I say, in the beginning of June it was. In the marketplace, Tango Ice Blast, we've seen in quite a lot of places now. This particular store posted it on there. They had just over, I think it was 1,200 followers at the time, but that post actually went to just over 50,000 people. So I think the power of social media is increasing, and where we utilise it well, we can really engage with people. And it's quite interesting how much interaction now that you do get with the local customers, managed well. The key is it has to be managed well and managed daily. There's no point just putting a post on once a week, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's really good. And like I say, community retailing is a massive thing in the forecourt sector that I think doesn't get the recognition it deserves, I think. James, I'm going to give you the last word, because we're coming to the close of the panel session. For people that are focusing on fuel, are there reasons to be cheerful?
Yes, of course, because never let a good crisis go to waste, is the saying. If you're very wedded to continuing the kind of bog standard approach to fuel retailing, petrol and diesel is not going anywhere anytime soon. I think margins are particularly good at the moment, and they're holding up. So I think that's good. But I also think with that, with the margins, with volume staying steady, there's hopefully a bit of an investment kitty to think about some of the alternatives that are coming along. And, we talked about electric, so we won't labour that point, but there are all. I think what you have now is the green agenda is a selling point. In the past 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the green agenda was a pain for retailers. It was something that cost you money. It is now something that you can push and increase sales. So anything that makes cleaner fuels, whether that be the likes of AdBlue, whether that be the likes of carbon offsetting, whether that's alternative fuels, diesel from waste, all of these alternatives, they are, if you like, the bridge between now and the next 10 years, where perhaps there is a fully electric future in 10 years. But in the meantime, there's all kinds of opportunities around green selling, which doesn't take away from the bog standard throughput of petrol and diesel. So yeah, I'd be very optimistic. And as ever, the independents are at the forefront of these things. They move quickly, they're nimble. And yeah, I think that the big oil companies are much more focused in the 10-year journey, where we are going to be in 10 years, than maybe the here day to day. So I think that's exciting.
Great. Always good to finish on a positive note. I think actually broadly it's been pretty positive all the way through. So thanks Nadine, Dave and James. Really great panel session. We've had lots of questions. Nadine and Dave will be back in a few minutes with Paul Chamberlain going through some more detail about the stores specifically and a little virtual store tour. So please bring any questions for that as well. But thanks to all the panelists. We're going to take a break now for the next 5 minutes, and please go and get yourself a cup of tea or coffee, and we'll be back in a moment. Be back for 11 o'clock.
Well, thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you to Chris and to James for the previous session. That was absolutely awesome. Thank you. So, the next half of this, we're very lucky that Nadine and Dave are actually going to take us round a couple of their stores. So we've got a award-winning apple green and a brand new MFG. So Dave's in the background waiting to come on, but we've got Nadine with us now. Nadine, where are we going?
So we're going to our site in Spalding in Lincolnshire. So Spalding is our one of our flagship sites, and this opened in the summer of 2017. So I opened this site when I was an area manager for the business. So saw this building go up from the foundations. We've got 3 food offers in there. So we've got Costa, and we've got Greggs and Subway. A really good retail side of the business in there.
Well, let's see it. Let's see it. Let's go. Let's talk as we go and see it.
Super.
So here we are. Look. Do I need to? There's no sound on this, Nadine. It's just us. Is there something around the sign?
There's something around the pole sign.
Yeah.
The pole sign, I'm very proud of the pole signs. The pole sign's one of the highest pole signs in the country. You can actually see the pole sign. I think it's from something like 3 counties away, more like 3 roundabouts. But it's definitely a benefit to the business. It's a great pole sign. Unfortunately, the guy taking the video didn't get the pole sign in.
Obviously, we'll be teasing Dave over the size of his pole sign at the on the next video. So couldn't help it. So we're walking into the store. What are we seeing here? What's your thought as you walk in?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, the site as it is now, there's kind of quite a bit changed with regards to the external of our sites, because specifically through kind of the last 6 months, you can see there's been an increase in like the domestic fuel. AdBlue is a huge focus for us. Our AdBlue sales are increasing literally week on week, and there has to be a good allocation of AdBlue on site. So you can see the screen wash and the nice full bunkers and flower sales as well. Actually, during this period, our flower sales have actually gone up. So
Romance.
yeah, that's the kind of thing that we've been focusing on outside, and then looking at add-ons with domestic fuel, looking at the mini barbecues and things that go alongside.
Yeah, you said.
Etc. So
Thanks.
yeah,
let's go in then. Let's go in. That's not you filming, is it?
it's not. No, it's our regional manager doing the film.
So you've got your signs up for the mask. You're going in straight away. What we're seeing here.
Yeah, so you can see obviously the social distancing element of the site, the ice cream and pickup lines, sandwich chiller, and obviously there we've got the minerals bay. Leading you into the confectionery on the left-hand side, and then the pick-up crisps and snacking that we have under the till areas, and muffins, etc.
I'm looking at the till area here. Looks it's a bit longer than you'd often see. Looks like there's quite a lot more going on there than we'd usually expect. What can we see here?
Yeah, so the reason for this is we have, if you can see behind it, you've got the splits, which is our split size cream section.
Okay.
Which is why that kind of till area goes further along, and then we've got the 2 bays in there which have kind of your muffins and snacking ranges in there, and then on the till points we've got various. A lot of that is kind of your tobacco replacement product. So we're seeing really good results from the tobacco replacement, and that's what you can see there on the till points.
But that's the vaporize at the end.
Yep, that's Vaporize at the end. So that Vaporize, they actually came up with that concept for us because in there is Vaporize and there is Double Drip. And they basically do the two brands, but they're focused towards two completely different markets. So your Double Drip is more for your trendy, I'm going to be careful what I say here, your trendy packaging, and for the Vaporize itself is more of a for the older customer, so they've actually put that unit for us where you've got Double Drip on one side and you've got Vaporize on the other. It's doing incredibly well for us.
Really good. And so you're serving ice cream across that counter from that unit there as well?
Yes.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's go in, because I know something else is coming up. You got American candy there, and we've got to stop here, haven't we?
Obviously.
Obviously. For those of you that don't know, this is one of the things that Apple Green are famous for. Dean, over to you.
Yeah, so these are our beer caves. This gives the customer the chance to go walk into a refrigerated unit, and in there you'll find beer, you'll find cider, you'll also find white wine, all chilled, ready for the customer to take home. Really good range, great promotions in there, and yeah, the concept itself goes down very well. Yeah, great.
I'm expecting some good sales having been driven from there. What we're seeing in standalone conveniences are move towards the larger pack sizes. Is that the same here?
Yeah, absolutely. So as this happened, we opened up new lines with Bookers, and we fed in kind of your 18, 20 packs rather than the 10, 12 packs that we would have had. So yes, that's where our increase has been, definitely.
Brilliant. It looks amazing. Always good fun to go in as well.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Let's go. Are we going in?
Going in.
How cold is it in there?
It's very cold. Very cold. Great for the summer.
Yeah.
Great for the summer when you need to cool down or the air conditioning's broke.
That's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, we're going through. We've got our accessories.
Yeah, so we've got our car care range. They're going into kind of your take-home drinks and some take-home snacking. Ready for Halloween there?
Yeah, end of aisle looks good.
Yeah, that's our promotion bay for this period. And then this has been a huge range for us. This is our Fordham snacking. So we've seen a big increase in sales. This has actually all been driven into sites. We've actually allocated it to all of our sites. So we always did Fordhams, but not to the extent that we had done before. And it wasn't just the cakes and snacking. It was the take-home pretzels, pork scratchings, anything that's kind of on a clip strip that we can get around site for take home. It's done incredibly well for us throughout the last 6 months.
It looks like you've got a lot more for take home than I'd expect.
Yes.
Generally.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's keep going.
Okay, so
we've got the machines that I think we're going to see at MFG as well.
Yeah, that's it. So you've obviously got Costa, and then next to it For Real. We've done quite a bit of work on For Real and getting these concepts into the sites. And again, specifically actually in our locations that are classed as convenience, have done incredibly well. So while people are staying at home, this is probably one of those little luxuries that they had, something to look forward to. The product itself is fantastic, and it's great. It's about the drama that surrounds the machine, because they get it out and then they choose what whip they want on it, and the flavours are absolutely fantastic. And then they've improved from when we initially put them in For Real. They're now kind of doing like the ice drinks as well out the machines, so we've got the kind of coolers in there as well.
Yeah, they are a bit addictive, aren't they? Are you having to do stuff around the beer cave? I've got a question coming in. about distance? How many people are allowed in a beer cave in Apple Green at the moment at any one time?
Yeah, so that's it's only one person allowed in the beer cave at any one time, just due to the size of them.
Okay, that's fair enough. Well, let's keep going.
Got the dairy section and drinks there on the left hand side. What you can see is a lot of things that generally we wouldn't normally sell in the sites.
Yeah.
Our stacks of toilet rolls, but a lot around toys, things for children to do during lockdown, a lot of garden equipment, all types of things that we just never thought we would ever see in a forecourt. That's what we were seeing there, all next to the wall in the dairy section.
So how quickly were you able to get some of these new products in, and where did they come from?
Yeah, we were able to get them in quite quickly. It was mainly the things that we were looking for. There were obviously a lot of gardening equipment. As I'm sure the 90% of the population of the UK now have beautiful gardens in 2020. So we gained that, and a lot of the product that came for children for take home came from a supply that I worked with when I was in Moto, Caswell's. And they were able to, Chris was able to get it into us pretty much. We asked the question and he was pretty much able to get it in the following week. So he was very reactive for us. But there's a lot of companies that we've gone to that have supported us through the last 6 months.
And what happens when things go back to normal with these suppliers? Do they stay around?
They do, because the suppliers that we work with anyway, and they do stay around, because we may not be looking for the gardening equipment, but now we're looking for other things. So when we think about how we move forward, for example, we would be looking now at your Jenga and your Monopoly and things like that, going this period that maybe we wouldn't necessarily have thought of before. So all the suppliers will continue to work with and continue to work with next year. This doesn't stop now. This is actually saying to us, well, actually, we could have done this before. And maybe
I agree.
We've had a bit of experience. Maybe we can do it better next year.
On a similar sort of vein, but a question's come in about premium products. Have you seen an increase in customers choosing premium over value? And what does that mean to space on the shelf?
Yeah, no, we haven't really.
No.
We haven't seen any kind of difference between the premium product. In fact, the way things are going now, I would probably say we'd be looking at more a value product over the next kind of few months, due to that's going on. It will be value that we would be looking at. So no, we've not seen any kind of increase in premium product.
Well, let's go into the food to go seating area, because we're amazingly running out of time already. It goes quick.
Okay, so there we've got our Greggs, an extremely well-performing Greggs. Greggs has been strong for us throughout this last, as they've opened, has been very strong for us, kind of running at what they were doing monetary-wise pre-COVID. The other two food offers are slightly slower, so we're not seeing that in Subway and we're not seeing that in Costa. But
Why is that, do you think?
I think with Greggs, it's the fact that this is a baked product. There's not much preparation for our staff to actually physically do that themselves. Where with a Subway, they're preparing a sandwich. So I think that's probably the situation with Subway. And then again, when we talk about Costa, I think it's a monetary issue, less people on the road, obviously, and the customer with Greggs, you can go in and you can pick up whatever you want. It's a quick, efficient service. They can pick up and straight.
Let's go into this Costa bit then. Why is it separated off?
So we have the Costa area just for the Costa, and then we've got a section for Subway, and then a section there for Greggs. The element is that it's kind of a store within a store.
I've got a question. This is a good question for you. Any plans to change towards some healthy snacking? It's quite difficult to get a healthy lunch when you're out on the road.
No, absolutely. And I suppose that's probably one of Subway's benefits for us, because you can get your healthy salad. etc. So yeah, I would say so. When we look at our fridge range and our deli range, along with our sandwiches, that's where you'll kind of see our healthy snacking. So your eggs and your spinach and your grapes and your fruit selections, etc. Alongside the sandwich range.
That's awesome. It looks amazing, by the way.
Thank
What was
you.
the award that was won?
That was best design and development for Spalding.
It looks very well deserved. What can I say? We're going to go. Nadine, thank you. Do you want to hang around just in case there's some questions right at the end? Is that okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Then we're gonna go. I'm gonna go to Bristol, Nadine. I'll see you later.
Okay, see you, Paul.
Dave, are you there? Can we bring Dave in? Hiya,
Dave.
Dave.
Hi, Paul.
Hiya. What did you reckon to
Yeah,
the
it's
Apple Green?
great. Very good.
Where are we going to go?
We're going on just on the outskirts of Bridgewater, actually. It's literally a mile out of the centre, called Dunboll, new to industry store that we opened at the end of June this year. We started building actually pre-COVID,
Right.
paused for 5 weeks whilst we were in lockdown, and then commenced to build again at the beginning of May.
Well, let's not mess around. Let's go. Let's get straight in. So I'm seeing the Budgeons.
You are indeed, yeah. So it's a BP Budgeons forecourt with a Greg's concession on the side as well. Yeah, I'm not.
How big's the pole, Dave?
Well, I don't know. It's a 9-metre pole, so it's not small by any means, but maybe not
There you
quite
go.
as large.
It's not a competition.
No.
I stopped a bit late, but I saw some electric charging there, which you mentioned before. I think
We did,
sort
yeah.
of
We
covered
put
that.
4 bays in there initially. Plan is to go depending on the power that the grid can supply, whether we go 2 ultra fast and 2 fast chargers.
But where are they positioned? I just
Where
sort
are
of
they
missed it.
positioned?
They're quite away from the shop.
They're not in front of the store. Obviously, people the spaces in the front of the store are reserved for, I say reserved, but are dedicated more for obviously the disabled users, for starters, for access, and then those people are making the quicker journey into the store. The EV spaces are on the side. Yeah, not exactly a long way away, but easy access, but not directly.
Fair enough. And we've got a clue here that there's some concessions that we're going to see as well as we go in. Let's go in.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to work along walk down the front of the store first.
24 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever possible. As Nadine said, the home fuels outside has been a big part of this year, and a big part of entertainment for all customers, I think, this year for being at home. This range, though, as you can see, has already sort of switched to more of a winter range in terms of what's out there.
You got the flowers as well.
Yeah, flowers again. I must admit, has been very good for us this year. The sales have picked up. So yes, now we're on to the first aisle of the store, obviously into the hot food run, the food for now. This particular store
this is just to get my bearings. We've just walked in. This is on the right as we walk in.
Yeah, so we've just missed that bit, isn't there? I know the area manager told me when he was filming there was a few customers that were ducking out the video, so we had to cut that.
Oh right, yeah. Well, let's go in.
Yeah, literally, we've just walked in the front door, and this is the first.
Yeah. Okay. So you got hot food and rollover.
Yeah.
It's like quite a new machine there.
It is, yeah. Now that's the sort of new spec machine in terms of rollover. 3 Costa machines as we work down the first aisle. Sort of healthy foods and snacking on the left-hand side. And for real, we've already seen in the Dean store. And with the theatre that comes with it, very popular with customers. And then Tango Ice Blast as well, which has been a great product range for us this year. Rolled out to a good number of stores across the network. Again, self-serve is the way to go. With Tango, customers enjoy it, mixing the flavours together. I think probably at the beginning of this year, it was really only cinemas and theatres where people could get that product, but actually, with the teenagers, the people in their 20s.
You've got a whole run of self-serve there.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have 4 or 5 different offers, basically all self-serve.
That's right. Yeah, and that's what we're doing in a lot of the stores now, because it's an area that's really taken off for us. It's great in terms of sales, but it's also great in terms of margin. So good for the business too.
Oh, and people are happy to do that these days.
We've not seen anything at all now. All of those particular areas are in growth year on year. So initially, there were sort of COVID restrictions around the Costa machines, but I think they're now advertising now you can order your Costa through your mobile phone, so you don't even need to touch the machine anymore.
To me, it adds a lot of theatre as well. I think it looks quite cool, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's interaction with the customer, and it gets people coming back. And I talked of social media earlier. They're all items that again you can post on social media that interest people. It's not just a quick just come and top up. There is some theatre and experience behind it from a customer's point.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's keep going.
Okay, go on the back wall now. So we've got a bay of American drinks there. Again, American.
Why American? What was the thought process?
It's we tried it in a couple of other stores, and it was a product area that was starting to sort of take off. We've got 3 suppliers out there that are bringing it in for us, and customers are really responding well to it. In developments after this one, we now refrigerate it as well, which is helping even more.
Oh, okay. So you've got quite a lot of take home there as well, I notice.
Yeah, there is. This is it's a pretty large store. It's 2,700 square foot, so it is
right.
It's not just a distress store. It is a convenience store as well. So it does have a full offer. We've also got key fuels and UK fuels in this store. So we're accommodating our HGV drivers as well as those people that want to use a basket and a trolley and do a top up shop, of which there are quite a few. For the beer and wine corner now. Yeah,
you've got the full range in there of everything really.
Yeah, and local products as well. So
right.
In this particular store, being in the southwest side of country, we've got Lily's, who's a local supplier just literally around the corner from this particular store. We have a range of their products in as well. So
and that's important to the customers there, the local ranges, is it?
Yeah, we try and particularly in the budgeting stores, we try and do it in all of them. So it's not just cider, it's eggs or it's dairy products, right. Anything else we can do. Here's the local sort of cider range. But
here we go, local cider, as if on cue.
Indeed, yes. It's like I watched it before, isn't it?
It's like we prepared.
It is indeed. But yes, we go from cider then round into chilled wine, and then into red wine as well, with a stack of special offers in the middle. Naturally, people want value as much as anything else. So.
Brilliant stuff. And I'm feeling we're moving into an off-license area. It has a bit of a different look and feel to the rest of the store.
It is, yeah. We just differentiate it both between a change of colour on the floor. It's a wooden flooring, with effects on the side of the shelves, and there's also a sort of hanging pelmet above as well. It just sort of differentiates them. You can see where it is as you walk in the store. So vaping as well, as Nadine said, is a big sort of growth market. Vampire vape is.
Once again, not behind the counter though, at the front. I was sort of surprised to see that in both stores, that it was at the front really, as opposed to behind.
It's actually sort of showing now that actually people like to select that product themselves rather than ask. They are quite small. If you want to look at some of the different flavours and select them, it's much easier to integrate with the product, look what it is, and find what you want. Still point area here, as you can see. Backwick spirits all the way across the back, all the tobaccos in the drawers underneath. Something we do in all of our sort of new development stores now. Tobacco went dark years ago now, didn't it? So
years ago,
we've been playing with it.
You got bagged?
Yeah.
Big growth area, I think. Is that same for you?
It is indeed, yeah, absolutely. And then we go into sort of protein sections as well. So this is the window area for those customers that decide to go, running straight to the till rather than down the food for now section. But impulse crisps, green bags.
So quite a whole line of impulse as you get to the till, really. And then where's this aisle there, the chilled?
Yeah, so that first bay was again as you walk into the front store, so an evening meal deal. And now we're actually going back down the first aisle opposite the Costa machine. So here's your meal deal in terms of your triangular sandwich, the baguettes that are made in store, then into chilled snacking.
Meal deals still working well?
Sandwich meal deal, yeah, absolutely, for lunchtime. More recently, again, we've gone into the in-store produced baguettes as well, which has seen sort of triple digit percentage increases for this particular area over the last 3-4 months. So working really well. And then your natural sort of dairy sections, impulse snacking sections on the end of bays. on the end of runs for people to pick up as they're going along. This is a premium.
Store looks absolutely spotless. Everything's full face. Somebody's worked hard, haven't they?
To be fair, it's a standard one. Don't get me wrong, this one is looking particularly good. Would I say it? Every store looks like this every day, of course not.
Yeah.
But it is something over the last 12 months that we've really been sort of focusing on in terms of that first impression and standard that the customer gets. Whether it's 7 a.m. in the morning or 7 p.m. at night. We want our managers and our teams to be going around and presenting the products in a great way for all of our customers to see.
Well, it looks good. It's increasingly important, actually, as going into a store becomes a bit of a a thing to do almost at times, isn't it? In the current state of things. It
does, but if I go back to my sort of first days working in the retail industry, 16 years old in Sainsbury's, even back in those days, the last thing you did every night was you present your store ready for the next day's trade. It's not something new in concept really, but it's certainly making sure it looks good for the customer.
Yeah.
So we're just walking.
So now we've got meal for tonight sort of stuff going on here.
Yeah, so that was produce into fresh meat, that's and then into cooked meats and along. So if you wanted to make your meal for the evening, you can pick up and you select your individual products, or if you want to make it easy, you buy your ready meal. Freshly made in store bread, and then across.
By bait in store.
Yeah, the first bay is, and you get into long life and your normal rectangular loaves, which then moves into cakes. Jack's, which is another range of cake that's just coming through Booker, obviously a Tesco product that's come along and rolling out, and then we go into Fartherson's, sort of a more premium range of cakes, full day of that in this particular store, and then into Cooks, again, sort of more of a...
How many freezers do you have?
This store's got 3, which gives you a sort of meal for 1, meal for 2, an Indian. So a good selection there for customers to pick up on.
Going well?
It does actually, we've got it in all the butchering stores have the cooks in it. And it's premium products of course, but it's the alternative to a takeout. So when you look at that sort of price point, it works well. Their brand slogan is it's you use the product as though you've made it yourself. I know some customers do that. We have stores where we've got the full sort of 5 and 6 range freezers in there, and it does well for us. Yeah,
very good for pretending that you've cooked it yourself. Should one wish to do that, of course.
I'm sure many do. Again, just impulse ends in terms of sweets. Grab bags. Essentially the store is all around your top-up shop really in terms of grocery and ambient lines. It's in terms of the product that's there, is it the most exciting? Is it the most exciting area of the store to be in? Well, no, it's not. But to be a credible convenience store, it's all product that there needs to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you have to do it. It's not all about impulsing. You've got 2,700 square foot, so.
Yeah, there's plenty of space, and this sort of type of store really helped us through COVID because we have had people, coming in with trolleys and doing sort of full, 50, 60 pound top-up shops and more.
I mean, one of the question is of basket spend. What's happened to basket spend in this store? Is this if you know?
I couldn't give you the percentage on this one overall, but I can for the business, and that it's at least 1.5. What it was in sort of pre-COVID times in sort of February and March. Items per basket as well as probably lifted by, I think it was 1.7 last time I ran that particular piece of information, up from where it was previously. So we've certainly seen people buying more.
Well, that's good. That is good stuff, and hence the need for the full grocery range, actually.
Yeah, that's right. That up. And then selection, pet food, non-food, paper products as well, and then we just go down health and beauty, and then into this particular store's got the next bay, which is truck life, again based on the HGV driver because of the UK fuel car key fuels customer, and then into the normal car care bay as well.
Very good. I don't think there's anything I can think of that I can't get there, basically.
That's the plan. That's certainly the idea. I think probably the only bit we haven't seen is take-home crisps and take-home drinks, and that's the final part of the store, which is adjacent.
You've got your promotion bay. Where's this? Is this as you're looking at that as you walk in, aren't you?
Yeah,
the one that you see straight away.
This one's actually in the far left of the corner on the edge of where all the B&Y display is. So that's just the BWS promotional end. And yeah, I say into take-home drinks, and around the other side is take-home crisps. So that's all in the same area as your beer and
Got
wine.
a good question come in, you know, because you've got a hell of a range in there. Have you thought about electronic shelf edge labels at all?
You know what? We haven't. That's a great question. Actually, it's not something I've ever looked into.
I think when you look at the range of stuff you've got there, I can see why somebody's head went there.
Yes, no.
There's a bit of a cost saving time wise.
Yeah, it's something we've not looked at. That's for sure.
Very good. Is that the end of the video? Is it?
It is. That's where it stops.
Oh, it looks awesome. What an absolute fabulous store. Nadine, do you want to come back and join us? We've got like 1 minute, I think.
That looked absolutely fantastic, Dave.
Thank you.
It really does. Really does.
I was going to like ask you to critique each other's stores, but I knew you'd just go, they were both great. So I thought I wouldn't necessarily. I've got a question come in. Actually, I've got just a handful, not that many. I'm going to run through them as quick as I can. We're back onto healthy options again. Actually, somebody made the point that in Ireland, Applegreen has toast, for example.
That's right. Yes, they do. I think the concept was looked at over here initially, but I think the Irish market is a lot healthier in general. Even when it comes down to their snacking, their range is far better than ours, and they would have fresh fruit, etc., where we would have our confectionery lines. So yeah, and obviously our sites have the Subways in for that salad range, but we are looking at the healthier range, and we're also looking at our current sandwich supplier and their healthy range, and implementing that across our sites. So there is some work to be done on it, I think.
Dave, what's your view on a quick view on healthy ranges in forecourts?
I think it's
a real view.
Yeah, I think it's a developing market. You know, it's similar to the Dean. You know, we've got probably sort of a more limited section at the moment. You know, we do have the store we just saw. We've got a gluten-free section. There's 3 gluten-free sandwiches or wraps, sorry, that's just gone into the sandwich range. But yeah, it's going to be consumer driven. It's going to be what our customers want. In our stores that do have Subways, likewise, we've got that. We do have healthy snacking areas, and in that particular store as well. But I think it's certainly something we'll develop further in the future.
Brilliant. What about home delivery? I mean, we're talking about home delivery a lot. Are you doing home delivery in these stores? Thinking about it?
Yeah, we're not doing home delivery from the Spalding site. We have done home delivery during the last 6 months in various locations. So, for example, our Sheffield site, we set up our own home delivery, also supporting the local taxi firms that were suffering during that time. So we were doing home delivery that way. Again, it just depended on the demographics, and our regional and operations managers picked that up separately on the location of our sites. And
what about MFG, Dave?
Yeah, we're doing the same as well. You know, in terms of Subways, we've used the likes of Just Eat Delivery, but Uber is certainly the big partner that we're with. Uber's now in just over 500 of our stores in terms of home delivery, and tobacco has just got into that sort of home delivery offer as well. So it's certainly a big market and an expanding market for us.
Well, I'm whizzing through. We've got 1.5 minutes left. I'm going to really whiz through questions. Any plans to work with suppliers to improve recycling, Nadine?
Yeah, we've actually just gone into a new contract with our waste supplier. So they are very keen to kind of work alongside us and look at that in the future. So absolutely, they've already put the ideas to the table. So we're currently looking at that currently.
Very good. And Dave, mobile phone accessories. Loads of people working at home. Sales increasing. Same.
Not hugely, actually. It's not a category that jumps out as one that's been hugely successful this year. I mean, certainly we have that, the FIFO offer in all of our stores. So customers wanted it's there, but it's not one that has jumped in front of me as being.
Feels like something that might, with people's changing.
They come back again, yeah.
But yeah.
The iPhone's out now, isn't it? So people maybe want something new.
Yeah, exactly. Right, that is all the questions, guys. I just want to thank you both ever so much for taking the time today to spend with us. and actually helping us organise somebody going around and doing that filming and all that stuff. I know these things don't just happen by magic, so thank you for your help with that. Thanks to Chris and James this morning. Thanks, Nadine. Dave, this is it. It'll go. Anything else anyone wants to know, you can always contact us at ACS. But for now, that's it. Thank you guys very, very much. I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.